They didn't tower, their boots did. The posters and album covers made them look 10 feet tall, but the tape measure told a different story, and the camera quietly did the rest. In country music, a good hat and a steady spotlight could turn a modest frame into a myth, and the crowd never had to know how much of the legend came from charisma, how much from stacked heels, and how much from the magic trick of confidence. Fans talk about big voices and bigger egos, but the real secret is simpler. Presence beats inches. You feel it before you see it. The brim drops, the band hits, the boots lift the stance just a whisper, and the room believes. Rulers stay in the drawer, rituals do the heavy lifting, and the myth gets built one precise choice at a time. Start where the roots run deepest. DeFord Bailey, a harmonica genius with lightning in his lungs, stood just 4'10", yet he felt like thunder when he took the stage. He was not merely short, he was a pioneer who made a massive sound and forced the room to expand around him, the first black star of a platform that would become mythic. Honor arrived late, but the applause that greets his name now carries the weight of a correction. Right beside him in the Pantheon is little Jimmy Dickens, officially 4'11", rhinestone to the ceiling and grinning like he knew every trick in the book. Big hat, bright suits, sharper timing. On radio and television, he read 5'5" without pretending to be. He simply controlled what the eye noticed first. Then there's the modern proof that size and power never traveled together. Brenda Lee, Little Miss Dynamite, barely 4'9" and still blowing doors off hinges, took a melody the world already knew by heart and sent it back to #1 decades later, like time itself bent to her phrasing. Play any clip and you hear the paradox, a huge weight anchored in a small frame. Across the aisle stands Dolly Parton, 5'0", a one-woman industry who turned a sharp mind, a kinder heart, and a comedian's timing into a masterclass in ownership. She can turn a joke on its heel, make a courtroom behave, and make a camera conspire with her. The formula isn't height, it's control. The same sleight of hand works in photographs. Wide brim hats raise the skyline. Tall crowns lengthen the silhouette. Nudie suits pull the eye straight down the leg with rivers of embroidery, and a pair of stage boots adds a quiet 1.5 inches before the first chord rings out. Watch how a camera frames a duet when the singers are mismatched in height. Someone stands on a riser, someone leans, someone sits on a stool so the standing partner becomes the tall line in the picture. Angles replace inches, depth replaces difference. Because the song is the point, nobody feels tricked. They feel invited. Outlaw legends proved you can be compact and still dominate a town. Willie Nelson, floating around 5'6", never needed extra inches to become a universe. He had the road, the band, the battered guitar with a tattooed hole, and a public love affair with cannabis that crowned him a folk hero with a grin. The silhouette is unmistakable. Braids, bandana, boots. It isn't tall, it's specific. Specific beats tall every time. Over in the honky tonk corner, George Jones lived stories people still retell, and he sang like a man arguing with his own heart in a quiet kitchen at 2 a.m. He's commonly placed around 5'7", and not a single syllable of his best work needed more. Johnny Paycheck stood shorter than many of his peers and larger than many of their headlines. About 5'5" by most accounts, he carried the volatility of a fuse near the flame, and one night in a bar turned so ugly it stamped a warning label on his name. Even then, the catalog outlasted the crisis, because grit sounds great on a steel guitar and contrition can live inside a chorus. People joked he added inches by clenching his jaw, and maybe he did. But what remains is the defiance in his delivery and the way a hook can lift a person higher than any heel ever could. Stories age. Records stay fresh. Women in the 70s and 80s mastered a different kind of visual alchemy. Crystal Gale, 5'2", wore a waterfall of hair that practically needed its own tour bus, and that curtain became the horizon line. In still photographs, the hair is a prop. In motion, it's a special effect. Barbara Mandrell, also 5'2", could flip from steel to sax to guitar in the same show. A one-woman medley that made stature feel trivial next to velocity. Tammy Wynette's height gets reported around 5'1" to 5'2", and the whispered tales about her private storms never outran the steadiness of her phrasing. Loretta Lynn's own words place her right around 5'1" to 5'2" as well, and her songs step to the microphone like a friend telling the truth you needed to hear. The camera's bag of tricks mattered most on television, where mixed-height ensembles had to look like a band of equals. You can see it in publicity photos. The shortest person sits on an amp with great posture while taller folks lean on the back line. Negative space does half the work. Visual rhythm takes over. On live stages, wedges and mic stands become the secret geometry that keeps the sightlines flattering. A slanted deck helps, a smart lighting director helps more. The biggest help is intention. When a show is blocked to honor songs instead of egos, everybody photographs like a leader. Marty Stewart proves the point in the present tense. Around 5'7", he stands in black suits cut sharp as a record needle, hair stacked high like a halo with a fuse, Telecaster held like he invented it an hour ago. He curates the past, builds museums, rescues artifacts, and still plays like the night is young. That's a lot of stature for not a lot of inches. Grandpa Jones, listed near 5'6", carried the humor of an old-time radio show into television and never looked small doing it because laughter is the original amplifier. Hank Snow is often reported around 5'5", and the only number his fans quote with certainty is the miles between towns. Mickey Gilley shows up around 5'6" in third-hand roundups, and his clubs, songs, and swagger were the big part of the picture. The secret ingredient in all of this is voice, not just air from lungs, but identity shaped into sound. Once a singer's timbre and phrasing imprint on your memory, your eyes start playing catch-up. Think about how a familiar voice on a phone call instantly conjures a face. The same thing happens on stage, only louder. So when a 4'11" showman or a 5'0" mogul steps into the light, your brain meets a giant because the sound is already 10 feet tall. Boots and hats and angles can goose that impression, but tone and timing lay the foundation. A single syllable from the right singer can quiet a crowd faster than any spotlight. There's also the economy of movement. Smaller artists often learn early to minimize clutter, to stand where the light is clean, and to let a single gesture land like a drum hit. The crowd reads that as confidence. The mind says if they aren't shouting with their arms, they must not have to. That's poise, and poise scales. Watch Brenda Lee hold a note without moving anything but her eyes. Watch Dolly tell a story with a pause longer than a bridge. That isn't theater, that's control. Control looks like height because the brain links stillness with authority. The shorter the frame, the cleaner the gesture, the faster the room agrees. When revelations come, they feel less like scandal and more like relief. Of course the big hats had a job. Of course the boots mattered. Of course the cameras cheated toward low angles during duets. These are crafts, not cons. They're little course corrections you make so no one in the balcony strains to see a star. You wouldn't run a marathon barefoot if a good pair of shoes helped you go farther. Why would you do a show without the edges that make it look the way it sounds? The illusion isn't a lie, it's hospitality. It's a seat cushion for the eyes. If the stories veer into tabloid lanes, they do so carefully, because the goal here isn't to gawk, it's to understand how legend survives. Willie's love of cannabis became part of his brand the way braids became part of his outline, and people who never listened to a full album still know the punchline. George's wild years turned into folklore you half laugh at, half learn from, the kind that makes barstool philosophers nod. Paycheck's darkest chapter became a cautionary tale with a chorus you can still shout at a stoplight. Whenever a joke about height showed up, the best artists grinned, flipped it, and made the moment work for them. That's stagecraft, not insecurity. Once you notice the pattern, you start spotting it everywhere. A stage manager places a monitor exactly where a shorter singer naturally rests a boot. Microphones rise an extra notch during banter, then come down a hair for harmony. The tallest bandmate drifts 2 steps back for 10 seconds while a soloist steps forward, stretching depth into height and tricking your eyes into generosity. None of this is cynical. It's collaboration. The audience consents to the spell because the spell is kind and the result is beautiful. Legends stick when they give people something to repeat. Brenda Lee delivered a miracle headline by returning to #1 from half a century away, and that stat alone will ride through holiday parties for years. Dolly turned a legal fight into a masterclass in self-ownership, then made the lesson so charming nobody felt lectured. DeFord Bailey's long-delayed flowers taught a new generation that a giant can carry a harmonica and a history at the same time. Little Jimmy Dickens made sparkle structural. The refrain is simple and true: presence pays the bills. So if you ever catch yourself thinking a performer must be tall because the room feels small in their hands, take a second look. Watch where the lights fall. Watch how the hat crowns the frame. Watch how the boots set the angle of the knee and lift the stance just enough to change the proportions. Listen for the breath before the note that makes the rest of the band inhale. The spell is 1,000 choices, none of which require a lie, all of which aim at one target. Aim your attention at the feeling that matters and keep it there. The industry knows this by heart. The best photographers coach posture and chin angles like great teachers shape vowels. Wardrobe designers care about vertical seams. Hairstylists build height where cameras need it. Old-school posters loved a hero angle where the brim splits the sky, and today's social clips still tilt the phone a breath from below. You don't have to notice any of it. Honestly, it works better when you don't. The highest compliment to good stagecraft is forgetting it existed. Here's the part most people miss. Fans want to be fooled in exactly this way. They want a story they can carry home, a story big enough to live on the shelf next to memory and hope. That's what a perfect chorus feels like. That's what an encore feels like. That's why a small singer can walk out in a simple jacket and look like a monument by the second verse. The audience lends the rest of the inches. They always have. They always will. When the last note hangs in the rafters, everybody shares the treasure. If you're still hunting for the measuring tape, try this instead. Think about the first song that ever made you stop whatever you were doing and just listen. Was the singer tall? You don't know, because the feeling swallowed the facts. That's the game. That's the gift. In a business that sells the invisible, emotion, memory, the idea that your life could turn on a single line, the visual tricks are just polite manners. They help you see what you already hear. They make the outside match the inside, and that's all they're meant to do. Maybe that's why these particular artists endure. They didn't ask you to admire their reach. They asked you to hear their reach. They didn't chase inches. They chased impact. When the impact landed, it felt enormous, like a bell ringing over a field at dusk. Brenda's voice still does that. Dolly's grin still does that. The Opry legends still do that every time someone new learns their names. The road keeps rolling and the boots keep clicking, and somewhere a hat tips in a spotlight, and a small figure grows 3 sizes in your mind because the chorus arrives right on cue. Zoom closer to the personal visuals that quietly help. Look at hands. Many smaller stars keep their hands still at the top of a phrase, then open the palms as the band crests, and the eye reads the bloom as expansion. Look at shoulders. The jacket sits high, tailored snug, with vertical seams and a clean plumb line that runs straight to the toe of the boot. Look at how the belt rides a touch higher, elongating the leg. Even the strap of a guitar can sneak the frame upward when it sits at the sweet spot just above the buckle. These are details you're not meant to notice, which is exactly why they work. Think too about duet partners who were taller and how gracefully the balance gets struck. A towering singer sits at the piano for a ballad while the shorter partner stands beside the bench, equalizing the shot without a word. 2 singers share the center mic, and the camera lands just below eye level so both look heroic. A trio walks to the lip of the stage in staggered depth, and the audience sees power instead of difference. The best teams make that math invisible, and the result feels natural, which is the only result that lasts. There's a deeper reason these illusions never feel cheap. They serve the song, not the ego. They exist so the story can ride without static. If a heartbreak lyric needs the singer to look unbreakable until the bridge, the hat, the boots, the light, and the stance will conspire to deliver it. If a kiss-off anthem demands playful danger, the camera will tilt a breath lower, the brim will shadow the eyes, and the smile will flash like a blade. Height is a detail, mood is the mission wins. Circle back to the roll call and you'll hear a clinic in turning limits into signatures. DeFord Bailey, 4'10", blew a harmonica and built a highway. Little Jimmy Dickens, 4'11", made sparkle structural. Brenda Lee, 4'9", put a holiday standard back on the throne. Dolly Parton, 5'0", turned jokes into gold with a laugh. Willie Nelson, around 5'6", wore the road like a skin. George Jones, around 5'7", married heartbreak to melody and made both sound inevitable. Johnny Paycheck, about 5'5", proved that stubbornness can outsing scandal if the hook is honest. Loretta, Tammy, Crystal, and Barbara showed that 5'2" is plenty when the room is listening. Marty Stewart, Grandpa Jones, Hank Snow, and Mickey Gilley remind anyone paying attention that reported numbers don't measure reach. Strip away the gear and the tricks and you're left with the thing that actually makes a person look big: conviction. That's why the smallest kid in a school chorus can anchor the final note if they refuse to blink. That's why a compact ball player can run a stadium if the swing is pure. Music has its own physics. Conviction amplifies everything it touches. It straightens posture. It smooths breath. It sharpens focus to a point so fine it can cut through noise you didn't even know was there. It also travels, leaving echoes that make the next entrance feel taller than the body that made it. When the house lights come up and the posters come down, the math remains. Fans rarely remember the literal facts. They remember how they felt and what the story became later when they told someone else about the moment they were there. They repeat the hair and the hat and the grin and the way the band hit like a door opening on a dark street. They say, "I had no idea they were that small," because the myth had already done its job. It built a generous picture, and the picture stayed generous even after the numbers arrived. The next time a photo passes your feed and a name from another era glows in the caption, look twice. Maybe the person in that frame was 4'9" or 5'0" or 5'6" on a good day in tall heels. Maybe they were smaller than the bandmate to the left and the guest star to the right. It won't matter. Your brain will file the image under big because the voice already filed the paperwork. The boots were just a signature, the hat was a notarized stamp, the look was the envelope, but the letter was the song. In the end, that's the promise this music keeps making. It promises that anybody who carries a true song with care can grow the room around them until every seat feels close. It promises a path from modest to monumental, paved not with just talk but with work, wit, and timing. It promises that presence is a craft you can practice until it looks like a gift you were born with. And it promises that when the chorus hits just right, everybody in the building becomes taller together. The crowd stands, the claps roll forward, and for a breath and a half the whole place feels 10 feet high.